Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Kind of got an interesting firearm on the table. It's a CZ75 Compact. And we've got several CZs, but this is the first one that's actually just a 75. You know, we've got the SPL1 and a few others, but this one is basically just a smaller version of the classic CZ75. This is chambered in 9mm. It's 7.24 inches from front to back, so it's a fairly long gun, especially when you factor in the beaver tail. It's 5.03 inches tall, and it's 1.38 inches thick. So it's not a super compact, but it is much smaller than a full-size CZ. So we'll start out with that, of course, it is unloaded. The magazine's kind of interesting. On this side, it's 11 rounds of 40. On this side, it's 15 rounds of 9mm. So it's apparent that they're trying to say the same magazine could be used for 40 and 9mm. This is only 9mm, so of course the 15 round side would matter. On their site it says 14 rounds. So it's kind of really interesting. I know CZ site's not necessarily the best for trying to figure out what it is you've got. They tend to have, nice detailed specs when you finally find the thing you're looking for. This weighs 32.8 ounces, so it's not really light. It is a steel frame, and of course a steel slide. And interestingly enough, this is 2 ounces heavier than a fully loaded Glock 19. So it's not a light gun, and CZ actually doesn't want it to be a light gun. On their site, one of the quotes is, only 2.4 ounces lost over the full-size CZ75. So they want it to be a nice heavy gun for soft recoil and manageability. And it is. The recoil on this is very comfortable. 9mm recoil is not bad to start with. When you put it into a relatively heavy gun, the recoil is very smooth on this. And the weight's really not a problem. It's well balanced. When you hold it, it fits well in the hand, and it balances well in the hand, so that the weight itself isn't really a problem, unless you were trying to concealed carry. If you're looking for concealed carry, you could carry this. A lot of people carry 1911s, but there's others that are lighter and smaller that probably would be better for that. But that's what they target this for. They're targeting this as a concealed carry gun. It does have 3-dot sights, and they're photoluminescent. So they glow when they've been exposed to light. Not a viable replacement for night sights necessarily, but they do stand out, and they're really clear and easy to see. Now we did find on this particular gun, the sight was canted a little bit to the left when we got it, and I had to straighten it out a little bit. And that kind of affected our groupings. We found that the gun was capable of grouping tight, but with the sights off we were grouping left. So then we'd start scattering around as we tried to figure out what we were doing wrong, till we finally figured out the sight was off. And I don't know if that happened, mishandling on the way from the manufacturer to us, or if they, their quality control slipped a little bit and allowed the sight to be off. And at the time it was visibly off. You could tell once you looked at it closely, and there was like a ledge on this side you could catch with your fingernail, and it was recessed on this side, so you could tell it was shifted to the left. Not a really big deal, relatively easy to fix. It just kind of affected our groupings. When we ignored that and just aimed where we were aiming and didn't try to compensate, it would pull nice tight groups. This is intended to be a safe weapon to carry. It does have a thumb safety, which can only be activated when the hammer is cocked, just like a 1911, and it's not a decocker. It also has an internal firing pin block, so when the trigger's not pulled, the firing pin is mechanically blocked. Pull the trigger and that automatically disengages. And it's got another feature that's kind of interesting. It's got a quarter cock position. So when it's in this position, the hammer is held back, and you cannot get the hammer to hit the firing pin without breaking that mechanism. So it acts as an additional layer of safety. You can't put the thumb safety on in the quarter cock position. So if you were carrying it in that quarter cock position, you would carry it with the safety off, and it would effectively be in double action mode. And then when you pull the trigger, it will pull the hammer all the way back and fire. If you pull the trigger again a little bit, it'll go back to that quarter cock position. Now, interestingly enough, some of those features would imply that you would be able to carry this hammer down, chamber-loaded hammer down. In my opinion, this gun is not safe to carry in that mode. Even though it is a double-action gun, there's really no safe way to get it in the hammer down position that doesn't involve pulling on the trigger. So for example, I've loaded the chamber, it's cycled. How do I get the hammer down? Well, you'd have to pull the trigger, hold the hammer, and then let go of the trigger and drop it to the quarter cock. And you could do that. But at that point when the trigger is pulled, all of the safeties are disengaged, and the only thing keeping that hammer from hitting the firing pin is your thumb holding onto it. So there's an opportunity there. And then if you had said, okay, well, I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to pull the trigger a little bit, you could, but you'd have to make sure you controlled yourself and stopped, because of course if you kept going, it's going to fire. So in my opinion, it is a safe gun, but it's safe when it's carried either cocked and locked, like in 1911, or with the hammer down on an empty chamber, because again, there's no really good safe way to get that hammer down on a loaded chamber. From an ergonomic standpoint, it is a very comfortable gun. It's smooth on the front and back straps, a very nicely textured grip, and the grips are replaceable, similar in concept to a 1911. Fits well in the hand, and despite being smooth on the front and back strap, at no point did I feel this gun wanted to get away from me. The contour of it, the shape of it, and the texturing on the grip, once it's in my hand, it's staying right where I put it. And you got this nice extended beaver tail that there's no way you're getting hammer bit. That hammer can't get anywhere near you. And that beaver tail also kind of gives it a rest up upon the back of your hand. So it's going to stay in place and do exactly what it's supposed to. The magazines are steel with a rubberized kind of a plasticky base plate, so that when the magazine's in place and your finger's resting there, I never got pinched and neither did hammer. There is a little gap there, but it fits fairly nice and it fits tight, kind of contours in. Neither one of us got pinched by it. It wasn't like some of them where that gap wants to get a hold of a piece of finger every time you fire the gun. The magazine release works well and ejects smoothly. All the controls are on the left-hand side. There are no controls on the right-hand side. And the thumb safety operates very smoothly. It does have a detent so that it should stay where you put it from a safety perspective. From a trigger perspective, it's got a very long, heavy DA double action trigger, but that's normal. I mean, that's the way double action triggers are. The single action trigger is much shorter. There's a little bit of take up, unnoticeable take up, but not bad. Just a hair of creep till you come back on the wall on the break, and then the reset is right back out. There's a little bit of a bounce. It kind of clicks, and then your finger wants to keep moving a bit, and then you take up just a hair and you're back on the wall, and then you break again. So it's got a very nice trigger. It's a metal trigger, and it's kind of curved and contoured, kind of centers your finger nicely, and it's smooth and rounded. So it's a comfortable trigger. Shooting this for the time we were at the range, you didn't get that trigger finger bite that some guns will want to give you, where the edges of the trigger want to bite into your finger. Overall, we found it a very, very comfortable trigger. So it is a pretty nice trigger. Note that it's not the Omega trigger. There's no conversion that I'm aware of to convert it to the Omega trigger, and there's also no conversion that I'm aware of to convert this to a decocker safety or safety decocker only. Basically, the only version that I'm aware of is safety. Thumb safety operating like a 1911. But we bought this mostly for a fun range gun. These types of guns, the CZs, are very popular in competition because of their weight, their smoothness. There's a lot of little polishing you can do to make these triggers really, really nice, even though they're not the Omega triggers. And there's a lot of various sight options for it, so that they are popular in the competition circuit for a lot of people to use CZs, not necessarily the compact, but the CZ75s in general. Disassembling the gun is actually relatively easy. So all you do, of course, is you confirm that it's unloaded. You want the hammer basically in that quarter cock position. And all you want to do is you want to pull it back. There's two lines right there. You make sure those two lines line up. And then there's a pin on this side. And you can either push it out with your finger, or you can push it out with a magazine base plate. And it just kind of pops forward and sticks out. At this point, you just pull this loose, and the slide comes right off. The internal of it has got a flat recoil spring, which is non-captive, so you need to make sure you hold on to it. And it is a separate guide rod, and the guide rod is polymer, but I haven't heard of any problems with these guide rods not doing their jobs. Of course, it's easier to line up in the spring if you just look at it. The barrel is 3.75 inches long, and it's cold hammer forged. It's well constructed. One of the things I did notice on this gun, and there's a few other places where I'll show it to you, is it's not finely machined. There's machining marks visible all over the place. It works, and it works fine, so I'm not necessarily saying that it's a bad thing. But it kind of reminds me of like a Soviet block gun, where it's the machining is done to make it work, and you stop there. It's conventional rifling. Turn this around so you can get some light in there. It's nice and smooth in there. So it is well done. I'm going to say it's a very high quality gun, but the machining, there's machining marks in a number of places you'll see machining marks. So they did the machining, and again, just to make it work. It's got the inside slide guides. So instead of a normal gun where the grooves are in here and the slide rides up on top, this is going to ride down inside the frame. It lowers the bore axis, makes it a little bit easier recoil. And this design is on many of the CZs, definitely the CZ75 series, and it works well. That's part of the reason why it's chosen for the competition circuit, where recoil and getting back onto the target more quickly is critical to success. On the frame, and one thing before I put this down, there's the firing pin block. So as I mentioned, it does have a drop safety. The frame is very similar. It's simple, but you can see like that the finish that's on the edge of the gun doesn't wrap around smoothly onto the slide guides on the frame. So again, just the machining quality, the fit and finish isn't stellar, but the functionality is there and it works well. A little bit more complicated fire control group, but that's not unusual with the DASA, and solid blocks here. And then of course on this one, the guides are on the inside of the frame as opposed to up above sticking out like on a Glock or something like that. So it's easy to maintain, it's easy to take care of, easy to disassemble and reassemble. Putting the slide back together is relatively easy. Drop the barrel in. I reassembled the spring, and it seems to want to go in pretty easily and snap into place. So it's not difficult to do by any stretch. And then once you've done that, you slide it back onto the frame. And what I usually do with it is put it back to basically the in battery position, stick this pin in to capture the barrel, because sometimes you go to pull it all the way back, the barrel lug will slide out of the way and it'll be hard to catch. Pull it back till the lines line up. Bring this around, careful not to drag it on the frame. Line it up, snap it in. You're back in business. So despite being an older design, and this is a very old design as far as the CZ75s, they're easy to clean, they're easy to maintain, easy to do what you need to do, and there's no tools necessary for standard field strip type maintenance. So if you do get one of these, you're not going to be having a hard time dealing with keeping it clean and keeping it working. The MSRP on these is around $544, which is kind of consistent with another gun you might be familiar with, which is the Glock 19. And they're two different operation methods. They're not really comparable guns from I'm going to compare this one to this one, for anything other than size and weight. So from a size perspective, if I set them side by side and line them up beaver tail to beaver tail, you'll see that the Glock 19 is noticeably shorter when I line them up on the edge of the beaver tail on the 75 to the little beaver tail on the Glock. And you'll see that with a magazine inserted in both, the Glock is noticeably shorter. I've got the CZ on my left. Its magazine is hiding the Glock. I'll flip it around so you can notice the difference there. And from a thickness perspective, the Glock looks thicker because it's square, but the CZ75 is actually a hair thicker. And again, that's not a huge deal. If you're looking to carry a CZ75, you're choosing it because of the operating mechanism. But just if you were trying to figure out, what is a CZ75 compact like? If you can find a Glock 19, which they're pretty easy to find, you can see roughly what the size of the thing is going to be. And again, it is a little bit heavier because it's a true metal frame, steel frame gun. But it's very comfortable. And, I probably personally wouldn't carry it, not because I wouldn't trust it, but because it's a bit heavier and a little bit bulkier. But it sure is a lot of fun at the range, and any kind of competition you might want to get into, anything where you need a 9mm and you want managed recoil, this is a really good choice for that. So last thing I'll add before we wrap up, other than the sight being kind of off, the gun had zero malfunctions. It just worked. from the first round we put in it to the last round we put in it, and the variety of different cheap range ammo we bought at Walmart, it just worked. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe. If you subscribe, remember to click that bell so that you get notified when we put out a new video. Check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.